You have extensive pre-birth memories, and I would love to hear about those.
Yes, you do choose your parents. You were encouraged to wish for a hard life.
Tara Springett, Buddhist teacher, Qigong teacher, psychotherapist, and author of 10 books.
I've been a Buddhist practitioner for 40 years, and I've been always meditating for all these years. Every day, I was very diligent, and I've had many spiritual experiences. And roughly 20 years ago, I suddenly had all these pre-birth experiences came to me. So this was a Sunday morning. I had a lie-in in bed. It was already light, and I was lying in bed. And suddenly I had all these memories, like a sudden download. And while I was having them, I mentally heard this clapping and cheering. And I was thinking, what's this clapping and cheering? And when I tuned into that, it was my friends from the heaven, from where I was. They were clapping and cheering. And they were saying, she's remembering us. She's remembering us. And they were cheering and they were celebrating, because in that world, from where I was before this life, the main thing is that you remember this in this life. And so they monitor you kind of way. They must do. And so when these memories come, they notice and then they celebrate. And so the heaven in which I was, I call it heaven. I mean, you could call it all sorts of things, your realm or paradise or anything. I just settle on the word heaven. It was the heaven of White Tara. And White Tara is one of the deities of Tibetan Buddhism. And we have here a statue. And she's very popular in the Southeast. She stands for longevity and wisdom. And the name I was given for this world was White Cloud. So this is how I call it. This is not the Buddhist name. This is not Buddhist teachings. This is just my personal experience. And so I was very interested when I had these memories. What I always wanted to know when I hear these kind of stories of people having pre-birth memories or NDEs, or also I was part of the spiritualist church here in England, where people make contact with the dead, or with spirit, they call it. I always wanted to know, what do people do all day in the other world? How do they spend their days? Do they eat? Do they drink? Do they have partners? Do they have families? You know, that was of real importance to me. Now, I got all this information in my experience. So it was a very small heaven. So it wasn't the type of heaven with manicured lawns or beautiful flowers, or no, it was beautiful from nature, but it wasn't with gold palaces and crystals. It wasn't that type of place. It was more like an orchard. It was a beautiful orchard with beautiful apple trees, gnarly apple trees, on a meadow and on a hillside. And the hillside was overlooking mountain ranges after mountain ranges after mountain ranges. It was absolutely beautiful. I just wanted to make the distinction that it wasn't necessarily what we associate with the idea of paradise, the manicured park-like, surroundings. And it was a very small place. So it was maybe like 15, 18 people of us there. And the central figure was White Tara. And she was there, and she was sitting in this orchard, and she was maybe 3-4 meters high. She was much higher, bigger than us. And the main activity that we did in this world was sitting in front of her in a kind of darshan-like experience. So we were sitting in front of her, soaking in the light. That's basically what we did all day. And so we were like 18 different, or 16, 18 different people. And so this was also quite interesting. So the bodies of us, they weren't really developed. Tara had a proper body, basically like we see her. but with proper colors and, just golden, but white and ornaments and so on. But we devotees, or however you want to call that, we were more like, we didn't have proper bodies. We had so more whimsical, like wisps of energy, maybe like a ghost in a children's book, just a little something. And it wasn't really clear, was it like legs or arms or head? It was just like, yes, there is someone, but you couldn't really make out what that was. And there was no gender. So we were all, the vibe I got was like teenagers who hadn't discovered sex yet, and so there was a young atmosphere, and we were all, so that was very important. So the atmosphere between us was extremely loving. So there was no jealousy, there was no envy, there was no comparing. Are you nearer to Tara than me? Are you more beautiful than me? Are you better and this and that? And really, through being on White Cloud and having experienced that, this complete love, it becomes clear just how much we human beings do that, all that comparing, the envy and all of that, and the complete absence of that. And instead, there was such a turning towards each other in the wish to help. So it wasn't just like we were just next to each other and weren't really interested in each other. No, we were really helping each other very kindly, very sweet. But the main figure, the one that we were all in love with, was White Tara, and there was no jealousy. And so basically we sat in front of her on little cushions day and night. At night we also slept, but I'll come to that in a moment. But the most of the time was spent just sitting there, soaking in the vibes, and with the goal that when we come to this earth, that we would remember it, that we were filled with these vibes of love, compassion, wisdom, and that we would bring it to this earth. So that was the idea.
As you may have noticed, I've recently expanded my podcast niche to include not only profound spiritual experiences, but anything and everything that could contribute towards the healing of humanity and the planet, including but not limited to bioenergetic medicine, quantum health, regenerative agriculture, sustainability, conscious parenting. As I've made this transition, I've experienced a significant drop in views on the podcast because the algorithm is confused by the change. In order to keep this podcast running, it would mean so much to me if you could help me show the algorithm that this is the content you want. If you love this video, could you help me out by A, subscribing if you haven't, leaving a comment, and sharing this video with others who would enjoy it. Let's make an impact on the healing of this planet together. It takes all of us to make this happen. Thank you so much for your support.
Now, I am also interested in food and sleeping arrangements. I have a family, I have children. For me, things like that are important. So I wanted to know, do we eat? And the answer was, even though we had these whimsical bodies, yes, we did have to have some sustenance, but it wasn't like the food that we eat here, which is like heavy and large portions of heavy stuff and beans and meat and whatever, eggs and vegetables. This was actually quite funny. So the drinks we made there, like we do on Earth, they were all teas. So we had a little garden in which we cultivated some vegetables and some herbs to make tea and food out of it. And the drinks we made, like we make tea here. So we put them into water, and then the leaves are discarded, and we drink the water. And the food, well, that was very funny. There were little bits of something, which I don't know what it was. They looked like little bits of polystyrene, but obviously it wasn't polystyrene. And so the vegetables would go in the bottom of the pot, and they would be boiled, and the steam would rise, and there was like a sieve on top of the pot, and the steam would rise through these little bits, and they would then take the essence of the vegetable, and the vegetable would be discarded. So the vegetable, we couldn't eat that, that was much too heavy for our, we would just eat this little, whatever that was. And also there wasn't meal times. We wouldn't eat heavy meals like we do here, where you eat a big plate of stuff and afterwards you feel really stuffed and heavy. We might go past this little kitchen area or whatever you wanted to call it, and you would take like one morsel and you would just eat that, and that would be it for the day, or maybe 2 or 3 morsels, and that would be it. And so we had the sustenance, and there was no evacuation either, So anything that needed to be evacuated was done, I don't know, like we breathe out. I don't know if we had lungs, if we would breathe, but there was some, it was just going out. So all the messy business of having a human body was not the case there. So there was a little bit of gardening going on, apart from the sitting in front of the vibes, in front of Tara and soaking in the vibes. And the sleeping arrangements, yes, we did have to sleep. And so in this orchard, there was a little greenhouse, or a medium-sized greenhouse. And it was a bit ramshackle, so it wasn't fancy, It was made of glass and wood, or something that looked like glass. And if you went in, then you had in the middle a little dirt track like in a normal old-fashioned greenhouse. And right and left, there were where you normally have the plants. There were like straw, and we would just lie on this straw like sardines. But there was nothing going on there between us, because we were all sexless and genderless. I don't know if I said that already. So there was no gender, no sex, no nothing. No romantic attachment, no special relationship. Everybody was really kind to everybody. So just like an ideal way how we would love our children to get on with each other in school. That would be so wonderful if they all would be so nice to each other. But unfortunately, they aren't often. And so this is how we slept. And then I was also obviously the question about how is the next rebirth on Earth? How is this happening? And so, I've heard in a lot of NDEs, people make contracts and they choose their rebirth. This is not how that was. Instead it was we were encouraged to wish for a hard life on Earth in order to burn away as much bad karma as possible. And just like in this life, if you follow a religion, you are encouraged to live a good life so that you go to paradise. And there you were encouraged to wish for a hard life, to burn away a lot of bad karma. And so you have this back and forth, and spend as much time in these higher realms, and as few incarnations on this earth as possible. So that's the idea. And the more you soak up the vibes in that realm, the less lives you need to live on this earth, because basically you pass the test. You conduct yourself very beautifully, and you don't get tempted into bad behavior and all of that, and then you burn away lots of karma, and you don't need to have endless amount of reincarnations to learn the lessons that you have to learn. And so ultimately, yes, you do choose your parents, but more in a kind of way how we choose our partners. So we think we choose the right partner. We think they are wonderful. Maybe 5-10 years down the line, we think, well, maybe that wasn't such a good choice, So unconsciously. And so we basically, our own lack of wisdom get us basically into trouble and choosing parents that are not very nice to us, or something like that. Just like our own lack of wisdom might lead us to choose a partner who we have to divorce afterwards, which obviously we don't want. And so there is when the time comes, that you have to leave white cloud, there are certain signs and symptoms that basically you can't get up from your bed, you just lie there, and then the others know it's your time, you have to go. So you're not having a lengthy illness or something terrible, that they also know, okay, now it's time. And then they all gather around you and they sing you off, which is actually quite beautiful. And this actually makes me well. So they sing you off, and all the songs they sing for you is remember us. When you go to the other place, when you go down to earth, remember where you came from. This is your true home. Remember it. And so they're kind of quasi hypnotized you that you will remember all this. And then basically you pass away, and then you are in this. In Buddhism, we call this bardo, where you are in this place where you see your parents and basically having sex, and you go in, you choose them. But as I said, not always very wisely. And yeah, so I think these were the questions that interested me most. And that was mostly, I hope I remember everything. I told you everything that I remember. But maybe you can ask me something more. Maybe I've forgotten something.
Tara, thank you so much for sharing. That is incredibly fascinating to me. It's so detailed and in some ways different from other stories that I've heard. Do you think that there might be multiple, for lack of a better word, places or realms on the other side where people or souls are at in between lifetimes, and that's why we get different variations of stories?
This holiday season, give yourself the gift of community, connection, and healing by joining Love Covered Life Sanctuary, a safe, nurturing space to support your spiritual journey. Here's what you'll experience: a supportive community with forums and chats to share and connect, a December Acts of Kindness challenge to bring more love into the world, monthly live calls with me for Q&A, deep connection, and spiritual coaching, monthly live events with expert guests to inspire and guide you, always available on replay, and when you join, you get to put in requests for the guests that you want to connect with. After listening to your feedback, I've made this more accessible than ever. I've converted to a pay-what-you-can system, and the lowest tier is only $2.50 a month. This is your moment to invest in you. Step into the new year with support, love, and a spiritual community by your side. Click here to join or check the description box. I can't wait to get to know you and take this journey with you.
This is a multiverse, there is loads and loads of other places. Good ones, medium ones, bad ones, and very bad ones. And with the good ones, the distinction I would like to make is between what I call a spiritual heaven, where I was, which has a divine god or goddess as the focal point, which also would be in Christianity, where Jesus heaven, or what I would maybe call a paradise. And in paradise can be a wonderful place, with beautiful golden castles and gold plastered roads and diamonds and rubies everywhere. But the trouble, if you lived a good life, but you're not very spiritual, you might very well go there. You have amassed good karma, lots of merit, so you don't need to go to some awful place after your death. And then it's basically like having lots of money in the bank account, and you can buy yourself a mansion, and you can do anything, have a yacht and your own airplane and God knows what. And you can play with that to your heart's desires for millennia and millennia, yeah? But the trouble with this type of paradise is you don't learn compassion, because in order to learn compassion, you need to see others suffering. And nobody suffers there, so no compassion. And so when your good karma is up, because it's like money on a bank account, and you have to leave, because we always have to leave these places, then you fall out of this beautiful land, go down maybe to earth, if you have that karma, and then you will experience earth as a terrible, terrible place in which you suffer so much because you miss this wonderful place. And you can't cope with the bad behavior of people that you see around you because you never learned to forgive. You never learned to have compassion. You never learned to love despite all what you don't like. And so these types of places, they sound a good idea in theory, but ultimately they're not. And I think there's all sorts of other places in there, and in the afterworld. And so, yes, I'm very sure there's lots and lots of places. And they can be quite different, and people can have different experiences.
Thank you for sharing. This is kind of like maybe a difficult question, and it's something that I get asked a lot. And it would be interesting to hear your perspective. So in that place, you mentioned that all of the souls were so loving and kind to each other. And yet, in that place, we can't learn compassion and forgiveness because we don't have that. We don't have a reason to forgive if nobody's ever hurt us, correct? If everybody's loving and kind. But here's the thing that people often question is, if we're already so loving and kind, why do we need to learn compassion and forgiveness? What's the difference between those two things?
Well, let's just say it like that. If you play tennis with your tennis teacher, then you think you play tennis very well, very easy, right? And then you play it with somebody else who can't really play very well, and the ball goes everywhere. And that's the same thing with these heavens. If you are in let's say in Tara's heaven where I was, obviously it's very easy to be loving and kind when you're surrounded by loving people. But when you're here on this earth, where there's lots of people provoking you every day with all the stuff they're saying and doing and which you disagree with, then that's a bigger challenge. But that when you are, let's say, in a heaven with a divine figure, you learn that there. This is part of the learning process, even though it's a beautiful place and you get a real respite, after this hard life on earth. It's like an oasis, it's just like, it's a wonderful resting place. You still learn the loving and kindness through soaking up the vibes of your deity. But if you go to a paradise where it's just hedonistic joy, just let's build another palace, let's fly through the air, let's do this, let's do that, and then that definitely will not help you in any way to progress spiritually. But even coming from white cloud, let's just say for myself, I don't think it's always so easy for me to be loving and kind or compassionate. I have to work on that. But maybe I find it easier than some people, because I have these memories, And it definitely, since I've had these memories, since I have these memories consciously, it's been a great help, because it helped me to see my life in a bigger perspective. So I see where I came from. I see where I will come back to. I also have detailed memories of my past life, because that was also a question for me. How did I end up with my Tara? I'm a European person, so how is that's a little bit strange. But that you might ask me that story again. So yes, so having these memories is helping you a great deal to live this life happier and easier.
Okay, wonderful. So we're in this place, like this beautiful white cloud place, and then we come down to Earth or maybe other similar places to experience suffering so that we can learn compassion. And then is it in Earth that we start to incur karma?
Yes, so the way I look at that is white cloud, as I said, there are different heavens for different people, This was just one of possibly hundreds and thousands or even millions of different heavens. We were just 18 people. So just a small number is giving this away, that this was just a small thing. There are billions of people on this earth.
So. Okay, interesting.
And also, maybe one thing that I forgot is that there's also a higher places where people are much more formless than we were. They don't eat anymore. So we were so a little bit in the middle of having these dense bodies like we have here and being in complete formless realms in which you're just light and do not have anything to do with the food and all of that. So the way I see it is these heavens are our true home, and I think most people agree on that, the NDEs and the pre-birth experiences. And then this place on Earth, which we all find so hard, this is like a very long boarding school, with a very long school year. And we have to go to school. We have to learn a few lessons, even though our parents are very loving and we want to stay with them forever. They say, no, you have to go to school and you have to learn a few things. And so we are not completely alone here in our boarding school. We can phone up our parents. We can talk to them every day in prayer and meditation or channeling. But our parents, Tara, Jesus, or whoever, they cannot do our homework for us, which is something that every parent easily understands. We have to learn these lessons ourselves, that we control our temper in the face of provocation. Nobody can do that for us. Or that we say no to our addictive tendencies or curb our selfishness and so forth. And if we make mistakes in this learning process, and we all do, particularly when we are younger, I assume most of us do that. I certainly did. And then, yes, we incur more bad karma. But then we also incur lots of good karma, and so that gets offset. And if the sum total is more good karma than bad, then gradually our ability to be more in the higher realms become, there's a high likelihood that we can be there longer. However, that realm where I was, that was just one for preparation for another Earth incarnation. If you don't need to go back to Earth, it's not that you get to these hedonistic places where you can just play around. You kind of get a job up there. And that job is basically, I would say, like a social worker. There's only one fashion, and that's social work. And that social worker is like, let's say, what we call angels, where we've heard stories that, the angels are walking with us and they try to whisper into our ear the good ideas. And they say, don't do that, do this. And then obviously often we don't listen and we do the bad thing. And so this is what I call being a social worker. It's a very hard job to just imagine doing that, walking next to the human, talking to their ears, and they never listen. But, there's a lot of this type of work that we can do. So it's not like we don't care about Earth anymore. The idea, the way I understand it, and that was also part of this download, is that we on Earth, we are like one family. All souls who incarnate on Earth and all the higher worlds in which they also go back and forth and back and forth. We are like one big soul group, and we all need to get enlightened together, all of us. And we all need to help with that. And so we all have a function in that, in whatever profession we're doing this, or in whatever work we're doing. Like your wonderful podcast is definitely contributing a lot of good things, good vibes onto this Earth, I'm sure. But then when we are in the higher worlds and we don't need to incarnate here anymore because we've burned out of our bad karma, then we help in other ways, or even run our own heaven in which we, where the souls come to us and we help them to prepare for the next life on Earth. So this is a whole big group in which we all work together with the common goal to enlighten every single being on this Earth who's ever lived and will ever live here.
Wow. Okay, so I was just going to ask you, in the grand scheme of things, where is all of this heading? And then you sort of answered that by saying the goal is to enlighten every soul that's lived here.
Yes, that's right. And I think this is actually quite an amazing message that I got there, because sometimes you wander around here and you think, what is this all about? And I've had enough, and I want to go to the paradise world, and I've had enough of this earth. But this is not how it works. Earth is our task, And if you look into history, I mean, things have improved an awful lot from like 2,000 years ago, when they were barbaric to each other. I mean, we're still a bit barbaric, but not quite as bad as we used to be. And so, humankind as a whole is getting more loving and compassionate, obviously with lots of faults in there still. But, there's lots of good things happening as well. And it's good to see that perspective and to not give up hope.
Yeah, I love that. So let's say somebody's listening who wants to know how they can complete whatever reason they came to Earth, whether that's be to burn off karma, like you said, or to learn compassion. What's the best way for us to stay on track?
Well, obviously, that would be spiritual practice. Whatever path you choose, you should choose a religion or a spiritual path which has loving kindness at the center. And not every religion does that. So we have to be discerning about this. And follow the teachings of this religion or this spiritual path. It doesn't have to be one of the world religions. It can also be your private path that is working for yourself. And practice spiritual practices, praying, meditation, and also align your life in every way to this goal, to just say to yourself, I don't want to do things that don't really benefit my ultimate goal to become this loving, enlightened human being, and your marriage, your family, the way you spend your money or earn your money, if that all goes in the same direction, that would be ideal. And I also think it does require a lot of meditation. Because we are a little dense here on Earth. We're confused. We don't know what's going on. And when we meditate, it gets easier. I definitely can say that for myself. All the insights that I've had over the years, and this is one important one. It makes it a lot easier to understand what this is all about and why this looks so frustrating, but ultimately it isn't. It's all good. It all goes in the right direction.
I think this would be a nice transition into the 9 stages of consciousness that you wrote about in your book, Stairway to Heaven. This is something that's really of interest to me, especially now as so much of humanity is beginning to awaken, for lack of a better word, and expand their consciousness. And you've laid out these 9 stages that we progress through. Could you explain those to us?
Yes. So I used to be a drugs counselor, and I'm a psychotherapist. And it confused me, that I felt that with my clients, for example, the wives of alcoholics, of violent alcoholics, I needed to strengthen their ego. I needed to help them to say no, and I'm worth something. And yet, let's say, as in the Buddhist teachings, they say you need to let go of the ego. And I felt like, how is this working? And now I was a drugs counselor. I worked with the drug addicts, and they need different form of therapy than, let's say, somebody who has some sort of depression or anxiety disorder. The drug addicts, they need more a confrontational situation, much tougher approach. Can't just talk to them in a sugary voice and say, wouldn't it be a better idea if you give up the drugs? Just talk to them all. And so all of that, it made me very confused. So then I, looked very deeply into this. And there was also a lot of channeling involved and a lot of, intuitive wisdom. So I learned to channel like Tara at some point in my life. I could talk to her directly. So I asked her a lot of these questions. And this is where the book was written, Stairway to Heaven, with the 9 stages of consciousness. And if I just summarize them quickly, So we start, if you look just as in children development, in every child goes through these stages, and we end up at young adulthood at a certain stage, and then as adults, we might progress further or we might not. So as a very young child, we are in the stage which are called innocence, So there's no strong sense of self. You are in a sense of relative harmony. You just take things as they are, and you just chug along, and everything's okay. You don't question anything. And some people live their whole life in this stage. They're just innocent, basically, but they're also weak. They cannot really change anything, neither about their lives nor about the world. They cannot question anything. They cannot think rationally. They just repeat whatever people tell them. And then at some point, something might happen. And then these people might figure out, wait a minute, I don't measure up to others. Others can do all sorts of things a lot better. What then happens is when they're children, it's the terrible tools. They get lots of tantrums. And when we are adult, we get extremely angry. We might get criminals or dictators or some person who's extremely aggressive and angry, because we just can't tolerate the fact that others are better than us, And that's called the dominant state. And everybody has to go through that. And we also go through that sometimes in small ways, that we find ourselves in a situation where we feel humiliated because others can do so much better than us. And we feel like so inferior. And then we feel rageful and so forth. So once we learn to curb that anger, then we go into a stage which is called obedience. In obedience, people do what they're told. They live by the holy book, by a doctrine. All fundamentalist religion is obedience stage. No rational thinking. I've seen your video about why you left Christianity. I know you feel through that. So no rational thinking. You do as you're told. Women submit to men. Women are lower than men, and that's the obedience stage. And obviously, as you know, lots of people are in there and stay with that for their whole life. And people in that stage can be also extraordinarily true, because if the doctrine says we despise X, Y, and Z, Z, like whoever we declare the enemy, the obedience person will do that with no compassion, no empathy. And if people maybe experience some sort of betrayal in that situation, and they see maybe the leaders of the church, they're criminals themselves, and they're experienced some sort of betrayal that might shake them awake. And then they go on, or they have some higher education, they go to university, and they learn to think rationally. And they go on to the next stage, which is the ambition stage, where they say, wait a minute, why should I just believe this book? This is just weird stories. It's all contradictory. And no, I want to have something that's more rational, makes more sense. And when people go on the ambition stage, they become very capable of achieving a lot. And that's where, when you think about all sorts of people who have businesses and that get very successful, or academics, or anybody who's successful, it doesn't have to be academics. It can be anywhere where you have a task, you go to the task, you do it well. That's the ambition stage. And then you can get very successful, but something's missing because your soul is crying, because your soul is unfulfilled, because in the ambition stage, you also lose your faith, usually. You go away with God and say, that's just nonsense and so on. And then after some time, you realize something deep in you is yearning for a deeper connection to something. And that's where you go to the sharing stage. And in sharing stage, you emphasize friendship, you love everything that's natural, ecology, and you want natural childbirth, natural cooking, natural everything. And naturalness is elevated to some sort of religion, even though nature can be a beast, right? So You don't see that connection. And also people in the sharing stage often feel as victims. My parents did this and that, and now I'm a victim, and I'm irreparably scarred by my upbringing. All society has done this to me, and I'm the victim of that. And that, of course, is a trap. It will not help you. And if you understand that you are in the trap, then you got on to the next stage, which is the responsibility stage, in which you say, no, it doesn't matter. My past doesn't matter. The traumas I've experienced, never mind. I do this kind of techniques, and then I get rid of my PTSD, and then I will do all these techniques and improve myself. And these people get extraordinarily successful. Whatever they do, they can create amazing feats because they're not burdened by these limitations of the lower stages. However, these are the type of people that say, well, if you're ill, clearly you wanted to be ill, right? You get what you want. And you think, well, that's a bit uncompassionate to say, but these people are a little bit overconfident and they lack compassion. So if you understand that, then they go back and they go one step higher, which is the love stage. And in the love stage, you become, what we would call a saint in Christianity. You become this wonderful, loving person. And the only problem that you could have in the love stage is that you become so loving that you maybe a bit burdened by all the compassion, and you feel the weight of the world on your shoulders, and you're a little bit maybe lacking joy. And if you want to remedy that, then you go to the next stage, which is the bliss stage of consciousness. And in the bliss stage of consciousness, then you get these experiences that we hear the mystics talking about, of wonderful, blissful experiences and ecstasy. You feel God is in your system, and you feel the energy is moving in you, and you have amazing experiences. This is, by the way, the Kundalini experience that people are talking about. And so this is not without challenges, because your unconscious mind needs to be cleared out from all the stuff that you haven't dealt with. And if you do all that successfully, then you go to the final ascent, to the enlightenment stage, where you experience yourself as a deity, as the deity of your worship. And people sometimes say it's as if God looks through my eyes, or I feel as, you have a meditation experience as if you are the deity yourself, and you can bring that into your life. And in this enlightenment stage, you have that feeling that you are love. You don't say, I am enlightened, I, Tara, am enlightened. That's not very logical, because that would imply that my old ego identity is still alive, which it isn't. But if I say, I am love, and that is true, and there's nothing else true, then that would be the final and highest stage of consciousness. And you can apply these 9 stages of consciousness to all societies. You can also look for history and see it unfolding there. You can see it in your children, in your child development. And you can also diagnose yourself. You just need to look back over your life and say, okay, before I was like this, like I'm now, what was I before? Was I maybe like an ambition stage person, very, very, rational, very scientific, and very materialistic and atheistic? And then now I'm maybe like a sharing person, but sometimes I'm already like a responsibility person, take responsibility for all my problems, don't blame others anymore. And so you can diagnose yourself. And once you understand where you are yourself, it's much, much easier to leave the lower stages behind. And we also need to understand we never completely leave the lower stages behind. They're more like steps on a staircase. In order to get to step 9, you have to go through the other steps. You cannot just jump up there. It's impossible.
Very, very interesting. It was funny when you mentioned the obedience stage. I knew immediately that was the religious stage, because I experienced that for so long. And it's so common for kids in a religious setting to have a rebellious stage, like that angry stage you were talking about, and then go from that into religion and like submitting to the authority of whatever religion they're following. So anyway, that was just a kind of a funny side note, but that's very fascinating. And I love how you included like the realization that people will have that propels them into the next level. So if you realize you're tired of being a victim, then that's like the first step of moving up into, I'm sorry, I don't remember all the terms. I should have wrote them down.
No, don't worry. Responsibility.
Yeah. So if you're listening and you're like an extremely loving person, but feeling the burden of the suffering of the world, you are maybe ready to move into the bliss stage. So consider what the next step of your spiritual growth might be.
Yes, that's right. And also, let's just say if you are on the love stage of consciousness, this is an incredible high stage. I mean, we need to remember hardly anybody on this earth is on that stage, you know. Mm-hmm. I don't know how many people are on this in this stage. I can't really say a number, but it is a very minuscule number. But still, in these stages, you still have some challenges. And also you can, you in a single day, let's say if my baseline is responsibility and then I have a good meditation, I might go up into a love stage or bliss stage. And then after my meditation, I have an argument with my husband and I lose my temper and I go down to dominant stage. So we get the whole lot maybe in a whole day. Nevertheless, if I have this argument, I will regret it so much if I'm really at the responsibility, and I will apologize profusely and try to make it up to him or whatever, and then come back to the responsibility level and promise to never do this again. So it's not quite as rigid as it sounds if you first hear about it. But in order to talk about it, we need to make it more rigid to teach it properly.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I think tools like this can be so helpful for people to self-diagnose where they may be at and sort of as a guide for people on their journey. As I'll give this caveat, and I'm sure you would agree, as long as we don't use it to compare ourselves to other people or judge ourselves or anyone else for where we're at.
Absolutely. And if the comparing comes in, that's a sign of ambition stage, because that's only the ambition stage does that, you know. This is also interesting to see that not everybody has the same pulse. The envy and comparing, only the dominance people do that. And they get very, very, very angry about that. And then the ambition stage people do that. And then they compete and try to be better and have the bigger car and the bigger house. And they do it in a more subtle way. But all the rest of the people are not so concerned with all that comparing. They just do their thing on the lower stages more because they're downtrodden, because they feel like I have to put up with what my fate has given me. I have no right to try to go out of this. And on the higher stage, because you've that kind of petty envy behind.
Tara, I would love to give you a chance to share with the viewers more about your work and where they can find you.
Well, I have a website. It's called taraspringett.com. I mean, my name is probably in the subscription and in the description box, right? And I have groups where people can get spiritual guidance. They're called groups for Kundalini support and spiritual guidance. So there are people who have a Kundalini awakening, but they're open for everyone. Everybody's welcome to these groups, and nobody needs to have a Kundalini awakening. Which Kundalini awakening just being, what can I say, a little bit more confirmed that you're at a certain stage in your journey, and people that have certain symptoms. But these groups are open for everybody, and that's where people can find me.
Yes, your links will be in the description, so people can go check those out. Thank you so much, Tara. I really enjoyed this conversation.
You're welcome, Melissa.
Thank you for watching the Love Covered Life podcast. I'd like to invite you to subscribe if you loved this video. Your likes, comments, and shares are so appreciated to help boost this video in the algorithm. If you're looking for deeper connection and support, you can join my Pay What You Can online safe haven community space, Love Covered Life Sanctuary, for as little as $2.50 a month. It's the best way to financially support this podcast. You can also shop my paintings and my merch at lovecoveredlife.com. My paintings are my best attempt to put my spiritual, mystical, pre-birth memories and experiences into a visual representation so people can experience them along with me. And all of my merch is vegan, cruelty-free, non-toxic, and sustainably produced using organic materials, renewable energy, and ethical practices. If you're feeling stuck and overwhelmed in life, my course Alchemy is your step-by-step guide to a spiritual awakening into heart-based consciousness and manifesting the life you love. Finally, check out my other YouTube channel, Melissa Denise, where I share my own insights and teachings. And you can also find the audio version of this podcast on Spotify, iTunes, and Apple Music. Be loved, be happy, be at peace, and thank you for watching.